Saying that the Dark Souls series is a challenge is kind of like saying the earth is round, or that the sea is blue, or that cheese and onion is the best flavour of crisp. It just goes without saying. While the game's steep difficulty curve is highly manageable and satisfying once you get your head around it, there's still a few enemies that push it a little too far. Be it with cheap shots, fast-acting status effects, or just by being general pains in the arse, these enemies can often be impromptu roadblocks between you and the next area that's full of terrifying bosses waiting to feed you your own eyeballs. None of the creatures featured here are inherently cheap or broken by design, but are made intentionally frustrating in order to test both your patience and your skills. The world of Dark Souls is a cruel landscape where you shouldn't expect to come out without a few mental scars, and this rowdy bunch will certainly see to that. I'm Zoe from WhatCulture, and after dragging myself kicking and screaming through my first New Game Plus run of Dark Souls, I'm painfully happy to bring you 10 frustrating Dark Souls enemies designed to piss you off. Number 10. Giant mosquitoes. Often considered the point in the original Dark Souls that tends to make or break the player, Blighttown is a dank, hellish pit that pushes first-time players to their absolute limits. After fighting your way downwards through hordes of enemies, you find yourself in a toxic swamp with very little idea of where to go next. You begin to scan the landscape and on the horizon see 2 gigantic mosquitoes coming straight at you. But it's no biggie. There's a simple swing of your sword or a well-placed arrow and there'll be history. No problem at all. And then more come. And then even more after that. They actually never seem to stop appearing, constantly there every time you turn around or think you found the correct way to go, making long stretches of exploration feel extra strenuous. They pose little threat in terms of actual damage, but can poison you, which is not ideal given you're already surrounded by a poisonous lake. They're not a hard enemy to defeat by any stretch, nor are they worth much in terms of souls, but their persistence and likelihood to harass you over and over again makes them the bitter icing on the sponge cake of frustration that is Blighttown. Number 9. The Vile Maggot. In the grand scheme of Dark Souls' vast array of nightmarish creatures and terrifying bosses, who'd have thought that some of its most frustrating foes would be just some little maggots? The aptly named Vile Maggot is an entirely optional enemy that you'd likely do best to just leave well enough alone. They spawn from the backs of unfortunate souls who've been infested with a parasite that grows eggs attached to their spines. If you decide to put one of these infected out of their misery, their corpse will explode with a gross cluster of vile maggots, meaning you're now in for a world of hurt. These critters are fast, and they require extreme precision to hit. They often go down in a single hit, but actually hitting them can be an exercise in tedium if you're not using the correct weapon. They attack by lunging straight at you, which stuns your character, giving all of their friends a chance to take a chunk out of your health bar. They can also spit poison at you, which can be deadly if you're facing a group. If you see a man with eggs on his back, my advice would be to mind your business and carry on, both in Dark Souls and in real life. Number 8. The Crystal Lizard. Of all the entries on this list, the Crystal Lizards are the only ones that cannot physically harm you, but have still probably led to many player deaths regardless. You'll spy many of these creatures throughout all 3 Dark Souls games, and they always have precious loot worth killing them for. The only problem here is that once you get close enough, this pesky little lizard will make a run for it. If you don't manage to catch them in time, they'll simply disappear until you rest at a bonfire. The frustration here comes from how fast these critters can move, and how quickly they disappear. In the early stages of each game, you'll want to get as much twinkling titanite as possible, so you can upgrade your weapons and fight bosses more effectively. The crystal lizards offer you that chance, but only if you're skilled enough to catch them without sending yourself flying off a cliff edge while in pursuit, which can be a very common occurrence. Only Dark Souls could make you die to a creature that literally cannot hurt you. Number 7. The Bounding Demon of Izalith. It's quite hard to decide on what the worst element of Lost Izalith is overall. The weird level design, the infuriating boss battle, and the frankly nauseating orange glow from the lava are all top contenders. But one thing stands above all else, and that is the Bounding Demon of Izalith, which is quite possibly the worst enemy in the entire series. And yes, I do think that because I only recently went through the area again, so yes, I am just being salty. Eagle-eyed players will notice that these demons are actually nothing more than the bottom half of the decayed dragons you'll meet earlier in the game. Where those previous encounters are memorable and well thought out, the inclusion of a dragon's ass as a standalone enemy is thoroughly baffling. They deal massive damage, and can take what feels like an eternity to vanquish, so fighting them genuinely feels like a chore in comparison to any other enemy in the game. Thankfully, you'll only have to fight a small number of them, but even that doesn't stop them from feeling like a complete waste of your time and efforts. Number 6. The Bone Wheel Skeletons. Just the mention of these bony bastards is enough to boil the urine of many a Souls player, and for good reason too. Popping up in every game in the Souls series, the Bone Wheel Skeleton or the skeleton wheel, as it's known in Dark Souls 3 for some reason, is a persistent pain to the nether regions that can easily take you out if you're not careful. Upon seeing you, these foes will leap aboard their giant wooden wheels and launch an attack. If you're only facing one, then they're fairly easy to dodge or block, but in typical Dark Souls fashion, there's seldom ever just one. When facing a group of these wheel-bound nasties, you'll need cat-like reflexes to see you through. Although, more often than not, dodging one of them will send you directly into the path of his friend, knocking you down. Then to make matters worse, another will strike, keeping you on lockdown until the rest can swing back around for the kill. They deal incredibly high damage, and chain group attacks can be devastating, draining your Estus supply and leaving you wildly ill-prepared for what's to come next. Should you survive. They're fast, they're tricky, and they're annoying as hell, like Josh after 2 Lucasades and a victory in Tekken. Number 5, the Rupturing Hollow. These bandage-clad hollows have a nasty habit of diving towards the player, shrieking as they go, before erupting into a blast that not only damages you, but can knock you down, and in some situations, completely destroy your weapons and armor. Whilst not a problem on repeat playthroughs, your first encounters with the Rupturing Hollows are unlike anything the game has thrown at you before. You'll find these guys often sitting on the floor, ignoring everything around them. Get too close, however, and they'll spring to life, diving straight at you with their trademark belly flop attack. This attack can cause you a whole host of problems like high damage, stamina depletion, and most likely will knock your character off their feet, leaving you completely vulnerable to another attack. The speed at which they get to their feet and launch themselves at you can be genuinely frightening, and the added threat of breaking your beloved weapon can lead to some genuine heartbreak. Thankfully, they're easy to dodge once you know their tells, and they go down pretty easy in a scrap, so they don't cause too much fuss your next time round. Those first encounters can piss right off though. Number 4, the Skeleton Beast. Being alone in the dark can be scary enough, but being alone in the dark in a place called the Tomb of the Giants is a whole nother level. An entire area built around the idea of frustrating gameplay, the tomb is a pitch-black series of caverns that players must navigate using magic spells or special items to light their way. But again, this is Dark Souls, and you are not the only person shambling around in the dark. Lurking around each corner and crevice are all manner of skeletal adversaries ready to take you out. But none are as infuriating as the Skeleton Beast. They're a dog-like carcass with seemingly unpredictable attack animations that will leap out of the dark and slap you about something fierce with a flurry of hits, if you even think of letting your guard down. These guys are particularly frustrating due to their high-level damage and the amount of times they'll surprise attack you out of nowhere, which can often result in you being knocked off a nearby cliff edge and straight to an untimely death. Those with a high-level shield or good reflexes may not struggle, but generally the best approach is to avoid them at all costs. Number 3, Basilisks. Appearing in every game in the series, the spooky-eyed Basilisks are easily the most stress-inducing enemies you'll come across on your already incredibly stressful journey. Often found in dark, wet areas, the Basilisks make a habit of quickly ambushing you in groups. Once they're within striking distance, they'll begin to produce a large quantity of smoke that will obscure your vision. You'll then notice a status effect bar appear on your screen, and before you know it, you've been cursed, and the words, "You died," are plastered across your screen. This experience is made even more frustrating in the original game, with players remaining cursed after resurrection, meaning half the souls you accumulate from there on will be lost, until a cure is sourced from an NPC that can be easily missed. Outside of this insanely frustrating insta-death attack, the Basilisks aren't particularly strong enemies, which makes their talent for one-hit deaths even more annoying, as you feel as if these gross little lizards shouldn't be so infuriatingly deadly. Number 2, the Silver Knights. Let me just start by saying that these guys take more piss than a dialysis machine. Situated on the rooftops of Anor Londo, these sharpshooters are determined to not let you reach their level, and more often than not, they will succeed. This now infamous section of the original Dark Souls sees you attempting a mad dash across a Fantry buttress, while gargantuan arrows are fired directly at your face. It is possible to block or even dodge roll out of the way of these attacks, but that's only for skilled players or those with a powerful enough shield. I'm sure it likely won't surprise you when I say I was not one of those talented players, and that I fell from those towers enough times that you can now legally call me Bran Stark. Sadly though, this is only the first stage. Once you've managed to reach the top, you'll then have to fight them up close and personal. With very little room to maneuver once you're face to face with them, these battles can go one of two ways. The first, and preferred option, is to block, and seize the opportunity to land a well-timed kick to send the silver-clad nuisances careening off the tower to a much-deserved death. The second option is to try and fight them in a much more traditional manner, but to run the risk of falling to your own death and starting the whole section again. Thank Christ they weren't as bad in Dark Souls 3. Number 1, the Jailers. But some enemies were worse in Dark Souls 3. Specifically, these lanky masked guards, who don't seem too threatening on a first glance, But boy howdy you'd be wrong. The red hot irons they brandish look pretty nasty, but it's actually their glowing red lantern that you should be afraid of. This lantern is amongst the cruelest things that Dark Souls 3 will throw at you, as it can shrink your health bar to as low as 1 HP in an instant. After a 20-second wait, your health bar will return, but you won't regain any lost HP, meaning you'll be heavily reliant on Estus whenever you face them. The jailers are amongst the most egregious and frustrating enemies in the series for that attack alone, but that's not all they have to make you suffer. Their physical attacks hit hard, and they possess magical skills that directly affect your movement speed and your ability to consume Estus while close to them. Try to tackle a group, and you're basically as good as dead. Few enemies in the Dark Souls series feel as genuinely dangerous as the jailers. And that's our list. Which Dark Souls enemy haunts your dreams? Let us know down in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Zoe from WhatCulture, and you can find me being a shameless FromSoft scrub on Twitter @Zemaskel. Thanks for watching.